Welcome back. We will hear in this episode about the tragic death of Sarah Stewart, who died at the young age of 44, leaving Robert to raise their large family of 11 children. Through the years, Robert's children moved away, but Robert II stayed on the family farm, where the family home was again bustling with a large family.
For all involved, the whole process would start over again at daybreak tomorrow on the next farm. While the men were butchering hogs all week, the women folk were left with double the daily chores at home and doing it well. That everybody would remember this day in the weeks and months to come, when they sat down to a meal of pork chops, ham, sausage, or, best of all, pork tenderloin. Another delicacy that the Stewart family and their neighbors came to enjoy was the tomato. The tomato had been cultivated in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in the old days as an ornamental plant known as the love apple. William McKay grew tomatoes in his garden on the corner of Front and South Streets. His children did not dare touch the tomatoes as they were considered poisonous. In 1812, Colonel John Roberts was at the nearby city of York with the Pennsylvania troops and dined at one of the best taverns in town. It was September, and there were stewed tomatoes on the table. He tried them and found them excellent. He inquired where to procure them and purchased some seeds from the African-American woman from the West Indies who had prepared them. The next year he planted the seeds and had the satisfaction of eating the first tomatoes, raised in Harrisburg or its vicinity. When the locals saw that they didn't have to worry about being poisoned by tomatoes, they started to grow them as a favorite food crop. It is probable that the first tomatoes eaten by the Robert Stewart family were from that same year, 1813. Tomatoes would become a staple part of the family garden from then on. Robert's father, Hugh, 79 years old, died in 1798. The custom of the time was to have the neighbors assemble at the home of the deceased, where the family had cake and punch or cider for the friends and relatives. Then they put the casket on the wagon, and the team carried it to the burial place, followed by the family on horseback. The minister gave a brief sermon, and the casket was lowered into the ground. Hugh's burial place was the old Covenanter Newside Cemetery. Hugh's two sons, Joseph and James Stewart, administered their father's estate, and in 1805 moved to Ohio, where they settled in Butler County near the present town of Monroe. Hugh Stewart put in his will that the family farm would go to his son Robert. Robert paid his sister Mary £200 for her share. This farm remained in the family for 118 years, until 1881, when the last of Hugh Stewart's descendants, remaining in Dauphin County, moved to Ohio. Descendants of Hugh Stewart owned that farm where the old log house still stood in 1866, where Isaac Moorhead, a relative of Robert Stewart's daughter-in-law, Sarah Barnett Stewart, wrote a first-hand description of his visit to Robert Stewart's house. He wrote, "Today I am to see the old Hanover Church and the forks of Beaver Creek for the first time. For 30 years I have looked forward to this day. Ahead of us is the Blue Mountain. We passed through Lingustown." How familiar that name. Here we received directions for finding Mr. Robert Stewart's. This refers to Robert Stewart II, the son of Robert Stewart and the grandson of Hugh Stewart. We entered the old log house, door of double thickness and cut horizontally like a mill door. The fireplace was the most extraordinary I had ever seen. There were 9 feet of clear fireplace and immense jambs on either side. We stepped into it and looked up the broad, open-mouthed chimney to the clouds drifting overhead. Nothing but fire could reduce such a house. Indian arrows and bullets would avail nothing against such logs. After going through the house, I stopped again on the hearth, and I thought how many feet had rested upon those well-worn stones. All of my grandfather's and great-grandfather's people, and all of their numerous friends and relatives in this region, and many, many others whose names I shall read today in Hanover churchyard. Our kind relative and entertainer, Sarah Barnett Stewart, Robert Stewart's wife, spoke of the old church. "We are," said she, "the last family of the congregation left in Hanover." Robert and Sarah had their last child, William, on August 22, 1810. They continued to maintain the active, usually hectic life of a large farm family until the untimely death of Sarah, devoted mother of 11, on May 8, 1813. She was only 44 years old, and they had been married only 24 years. William was just 2.5 years old. The cause of Sarah's death is unknown. She was buried in the Newside Cemetery in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Her worn tombstone was still visible in the cemetery in 2010. Like his father Hugh, Robert was faced with the daunting task of raising his young children alone. In 1813, Thomas was 19, Robert II was 18, Sarah was 16, Mary was 15, Jane was 13, Sam was 11, John was 10, Margaret was 7, and Billy was 2. Robert's father Hugh had often told of the death of his first wife, Hannah, who died at age 33, when he was left with 4 young children to raise. The specter of the death of another young wife and mother in the Stewart family was almost more than Robert could bear. There's no question that the staunch Presbyterianism of his youth helped Robert Stewart bear this cross. Only with an amazing and resilient spirit, the support of his loving children, and through the aid and comfort of his fellow churchgoers, could Robert have weathered this terrible storm in his life. That he did and continued to be the outstanding father and grandfather that he was is a testament to the unwavering priority that he placed on family values all of his life. It is no coincidence that Robert's children grew to adulthood at a time when outbreaks of typhoid fever, cholera, influenza, tuberculosis, and yellow fever were the leading causes of death. Except for his children, there were very few of Robert Stewart's family left in Dauphin County in 1813. They had moved west, along with much of the Scots-Irish population in the area. Robert's siblings, John, William, Hugh Jr., and Samuel, had already settled in western counties in Pennsylvania. Ohio became a state in 1803, and shortly after that, Robert's younger siblings, Jane, Joseph, James, and Mary, all relocated to Butler County, Ohio. That year, President Thomas Jefferson announced the Louisiana Purchase. He commissioned Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore the vast western part of the United States, which had just been bought from the French. Their journey, the core of discovery, started in St. Louis, Missouri in 1804, reached the Pacific Ocean in 1805, and returned to St. Louis in 1806. As news of the new territories in the West spread throughout the growing cities in the eastern part of the United States, the fervor to go west grew rapidly. The descendants of Samuel Stewart, Robert's uncle, were all gone too. Some were dead, like Samuel Jr., Robert's closest cousin and neighbor, who died in 1803. The others had gone west, moved to western Pennsylvania and Kentucky. One of Samuel Jr.'s sons did extremely well when he moved north to Pennsylvania. David Stewart, born in 1792, was 21 years of age when he moved from Hanover Township to Centre County, Pennsylvania. He became the general manager at Pennsylvania Furnace and then entered the firm of Shorb, Stewart and Company. Mr. David Stewart was undoubtedly the most prominent and wealthy member of this large family. He resided at Coleraine Forges, Huntington County, from 1831 until he died in 1869. Only one of Robert's sons, Robert II, stayed with him on the family farm. He married Sarah Barnett in 1829 and presented his father with 9 grandchildren, all living on the same estate with their grandpap Robert. Robert II became a trustee of the old Hanover Presbyterian Church, and for many years he was the custodian of the church records. These records have been retained in the Dauphin County Historical Society, where they remain for future generations. Robert's oldest daughter, Agnes, Nancy that is, married James B. Robinson in 1812 and moved to Ohio. His other children married and moved away from home in the 1820s. Thomas married Martha P. Stewart in 1828 and settled down as a farmer near Springfield, Ohio. Sarah married John Cleland of Clark County, Ohio. Mary married John Rice of Middletown, Butler County, Ohio. Robert's son Samuel got caught up in the westward movement. He moved to Huntington County, Pennsylvania during the 1820s, then to Ohio in 1835, then farther west yet to Missouri in 1844. By 1828, the farm housed only 4 people: Robert Sr., his sons Robert II, youngest son William, age 18, and his youngest daughter Margaret, age 22. The once noisy and exuberant house full of children was reduced to only these 4 adults for a year. However, on May 5, 1829, Robert II married Sarah Barnett, and in predictable Stuart fashion, Sarah was soon pregnant and presented her first child, Robert Crane, to the household on March 14, 1830. This firstborn came just 10 months after his parents' marriage. Robert and Sarah didn't take long to fill the house with their children, 9 in total. In 1850, the U.S. federal census taker found Grandpap Robert Stewart, age 84, surrounded by Robert II's family, parents, and 9 children, with the youngest only 6 months old. The old man was back in his prime, grandfathering a large brood of children on the family estate left to him by his father. Robert's son John, who had moved to Butler County, Ohio, died there of cholera in 1849. His daughter Margaret was now married to Henry Kramer of Worcester, Ohio. One of Robert's brothers, James, moved to Ohio in 1805. He met his death in an extraordinary manner on May 4, 1835. He was driving his wagon on the road near Monroe, Ohio, with his wife Margaret and his 30-year-old niece, Nancy Stewart, when a huge tree standing by the side of the road fell on the wagon and killed all 3 of them instantly. He was 61 years old. During the early part of the 19th century, the English again tried to push back the American cause with a series of economic sanctions against the U.S. The outraged Americans, knowing they would have to prove their independence from the British once again, supported the War of 1812. The British troops burned the Capitol and the White House in Washington, D.C. They bombarded Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor, which inspired Francis Scott Key to write The Star-Spangled Banner. The war proved to be more than either country could afford, and in 1814 the war ended. Never again would Britain invade the U.S. Pre-Civil War Pennsylvania experienced an exciting time in history marked by a growing industrial environment and a growing population. The state was located on the northern side of the Mason-Dixon line. Pennsylvania had never had a large slave population, though there were slaves in the early days of the state. A 1780 act abolished slavery in Pennsylvania, and only 64 slaves were counted in the 1840 census. At the same time, states in the southern part of the United States had a large population of slaves, since their economy was dominated by a plantation system based on slavery. In the 1850 census, the state of South Carolina reported 58% slaves. The issue of slavery became the focus of the American Civil War, which started in 1861. When South Carolina fired on the Union troops at Fort Sumter. Pennsylvania troops rallied to the Union cause, and one of the worst battles of the Civil War was located in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, just 40 miles down the road from the Stewart farm. One thing was clear: the Stewarts never owned slaves.
By the mid-1800s, railroads were being laid and families were continuing their migration west. Robert Stewart was the one member of his large family who never moved west and kept the family farm throughout his life. See you next week.